Picture the most exclusive private ski lodge in Aspen, Colorado. Sun setting behind the peaks, everything bathed in gold light. A place almost nobody will ever get to see from the inside. Black luxury SUVs line a heated cobblestone driveway. A private gondola runs quietly, moving Forbes 400 types from the main terrace to a secluded helipad. Inside, fireplaces built from imported European stone heat, massive living rooms. Heated marble floors run wall to wall under Persian rugs. Guests sip $1,000 scotch, talking about international markets and charity galas. It looks like the absolute peak of American wealth, privilege, and reputation. But what if I told you that behind those marble walls, a $420 million laundering machine was running 24 hours a day? And what if I told you that directly beneath the imported Austrian oak floorboards, a multi-level underground vault was acting as a central clearinghouse for a global illicit weapons and sanctioned art ring? And what if I told you that the VIP guests sipping that rare scotch were actually high-end brokers, moving millions for brutal cartels and sanctioned oligarchs? What you're about to witness is Operation Winter Vault. Today you'll see, step by step, how the FBI raided Julian Vance, froze $420 million, seized hundreds of illicit assets, and dismantled a massive international laundering ring. If you believe billionaires who turn luxury lodges into criminal clearinghouses deserve to rot in federal prison, you'll want to see exactly how this one fell. Julian Vance was not your typical criminal mastermind. To the outside world, he looked like the ideal modern American philanthropist. Vance was the founder and CEO of the Vance Alpine Foundation, a celebrated high-end hospitality mogul who owned a portfolio of luxury retreats across the globe. His public image was immaculate. He smiled from the covers of business magazines. He dined with state governors and senators. He sat on the boards of 3 major art museums, donating millions to children's educational programs and veterans' charities. Vance had built an empire on the illusion of exclusivity. To even secure an invitation to his Aspen Lodge, prospective guests had to be vetted by a private committee, and there was a 3-year wait list just for a chance to visit. He wore bespoke suits, spoke multiple languages, and charmed the media with his vision of creating safe, luxurious havens for the world's most successful people. But beneath the tailored suits and the warm smile, Vance was something else entirely. He was cold, calculating, and completely without morals. He had realized years ago that the absolute best place to hide billions of dollars in dirty money wasn't in some remote offshore bank account. It was right in plain sight, buried under the ultimate symbol of American luxury. The scheme Vance built was staggering in its complexity. He didn't just clean money. He ran a full-service financial hub for the criminal elite. To understand the scale of this empire, you have to look at how he structured the deception. Vance used a sprawling network of 47 shell companies, all registered anonymously in international havens. These front companies were designed to look like legitimate hospitality vendors. They invoiced the Aspen Lodge for millions of dollars in non-existent services, from exotic floral arrangements imported from South America to private security consulting. But the real operation was hidden deep underground. Vance had spent $40 million excavating a massive, 4-level subterranean vault directly beneath the main lodge. The construction itself was a closely guarded secret, disguised as a massive geothermal heating project to keep the local building inspectors away. Down in those depths, Vance's team of corrupt financiers washed dirty cash for a staggering array of clients. They accepted bulk cash from drug cartels. They accepted crates of sanctioned gold bullion from foreign oligarchs. They even brokered the sale and storage of stolen fine art and unregistered, fully automatic weapons. The illicit inventory was remarkably diverse, carefully categorized and stored behind titanium doors in the freezing underground bunker. The money moved through a dizzying array of channels. Vance's team used trade-based money laundering, falsifying import and export invoices to move millions across borders without raising red flags. They manipulated the lodge's daily revenue, blending dirty cash into the nightly room rates of wealthy guests who would never notice a discrepancy. By the time the FBI began looking into Julian Vance, his criminal enterprise was processing tens of millions of dollars every single month. The numbers were staggering, and the illicit goods were flowing in from 12 major global source points, turning the Aspen Lodge into a truly international hub of crime. If you think a 4-level underground vault beneath a luxury ski lodge is the limit, the way they managed to smuggle millions of dollars in illicit goods right past federal authorities will leave you speechless. We'll get to that in a minute. Every massive criminal empire, no matter how well-funded or how carefully insulated, eventually cracks. And for Julian Vance, that crack came from the most unlikely source. It wasn't a rival gangster. It wasn't an undercover agent. It was a junior lodge accountant named Sarah. Sarah was 24 years old. She had graduated from a mid-tier state college, thrilled to land a job at one of the most exclusive resorts in the world. She was a diligent, quiet young woman who loved the meticulous nature of numbers. Her job was to audit the lodge's operational expenses, making sure the kitchen, housekeeping, and maintenance departments stayed within their massive budgets. One cold Tuesday evening in January, while reviewing the monthly procurement reports, Sarah noticed something strange. The Aspen Lodge was importing 4,000 pounds of premium Wagyu beef every single month. 4,000 pounds. That was enough meat to feed a small army or a stadium. The lodge was exclusive, yes, but it only had 40 guest suites. Curious, Sarah dug deeper into the logistics. To her bewilderment, she found that despite importing 4,000 pounds of raw meat, the lodge had ordered 0 commercial refrigeration units. 0. Furthermore, there were no records of commercial waste disposal. No rendering trucks, no massive dumpsters. The math simply didn't work. Where was the meat going? How was it being stored? How was the waste being disposed of? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. She brought the anomaly to her direct supervisor, who coldly told her to ignore it, claiming it was a special catering arrangement. But Sarah's gut told her otherwise. She quietly printed out the procurement logs, the import manifests, and the missing waste disposal records. She tucked them into her bag, drove down the mountain to a public library, and sent an anonymous tip to the FBI's public corruption hotline. That single tip, that tiny anomaly, was the pebble that started an avalanche. The tip landed on the desk of the FBI's white-collar crime task force in Denver. At first, it seemed trivial. A meat discrepancy? But the analyst who read it noticed the address, the Aspen Lodge. The FBI had been hearing whispers for years about a high-end laundering hub servicing foreign oligarchs, but they had no idea where it was. Within 48 hours, a joint task force was assembled. It was led by the FBI, but quickly grew to include Homeland Security investigations, the DEA, and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The lead agent, a veteran financial investigator, knew they had to tread incredibly carefully. Julian Vance was a powerful man. He had lawyers on retainer who could tie up federal prosecutors for years. He dined with politicians. If the FBI was going to take him down, they needed absolute, undeniable proof. The investigation was slow, methodical, and agonizingly secret. The first major obstacle was the lodge's physical security. The property was a fortress. High walls, private security patrols, and a strict no-photography policy meant the FBI couldn't get a visual on the grounds. They couldn't just walk in and look around. To solve this, the FBI deployed a sophisticated cyber probe. They managed to gain access to the lodge's internal network by targeting a smart thermostat system, which allowed them to map the digital footprint of the underground bunker. The task force set up a surveillance post in a rented cabin on a neighboring ridge. They used thermal imaging sensors to scan the lodge. The thermal readings revealed a massive heat signature radiating from deep underground. Something was generating a tremendous amount of energy beneath the snow. I spent hours going through the case file, and one detail kept nagging me. The sheer audacity of hiding a subterranean bunker right under the noses of the world's elite. It wasn't just a storage unit. It was a fully operational bank. The agents knew they needed an insider. An undercover HSI agent, posing as a wealthy investor looking to store millions in illicit gold, managed to secure a meeting with one of Vance's lieutenants. The agent wore a wire, but transmitting out of the heavily shielded lodge was nearly impossible. The thick stone walls and titanium-reinforced doors blocked radio frequencies. To bypass this, the technical team had to park a specialized surveillance van disguised as a utility truck just outside the gates, using a directional antenna to capture the faint, encrypted Bluetooth signal bouncing off the lodge's internal security cameras. It worked. The undercover agent recorded hours of audio. They heard Vance's lieutenants discussing the movement of sanctioned gold. They heard them negotiating the sale of stolen art. They heard the specific mechanisms used to wash the cartel cash. Most people assume that billionaires involved in white-collar crime are insulated by so many layers of lawyers that they are practically untouchable. But the evidence tells a different story. What's most surprising about this case isn't the amount of money, or the underground vault. It's the mundane accounting error that brought it all down. 4,000 pounds of Wagyu beef and no trash cans. The evidence was mounting. But then, disaster struck. 3 months into the surveillance, the lodge suddenly went dark. Vance had hired a new cybersecurity firm, and they had detected the thermostat breach. Vance panicked. He immediately ordered the shutdown of the underground bunker, halting all laundering operations. He ordered his lieutenants to begin shredding documents and wiping the encrypted servers. The task force was devastated. They had lost their window. Months of surveillance were suddenly worthless. They had no probable cause for a warrant. But then, a breakthrough. The NSA cyber team, which had been monitoring the lodge's external communications, intercepted a frantic phone call from Vance to his head of logistics. Vance was terrified. He was demanding that a fleet of unmarked moving trucks be brought in under the cover of a massive winter storm to evacuate the illicit inventory. He wanted to move the gold, the weapons, and the art out of Aspen before the FBI could figure out what was going on. The task force had exactly 48 hours to act. If they waited, the evidence would be gone forever. Before we get into the tactical details of the assault, a quick trivia. Do you know which federal statute specifically criminalizes the movement of illicit funds, carrying up to 20 years in prison per offense? Is it A, 18 U.S.C. 1343, B, 18 U.S.C. 1956, or C, 18 U.S.C. 1201? The answer will surprise you at the end of the video. The tactical planning was intense. They were dealing with a heavily fortified mountain compound, a massive underground bunker with titanium doors, and a group of dangerous individuals who had everything to lose. The FBI's hostage rescue team, alongside a specialized ATF tactical unit, was brought in to lead the dynamic entry. The strategy relied on absolute speed, overwhelming force, and total electronic warfare. The element of surprise was their greatest weapon. They could not let Vance, or any of his VIP brokers, trigger the bunker's self-destruct protocols or wipe the servers. The date was set. Wednesday, March 14th, 2026. The time, 3:30 in the morning. As a fierce winter storm howled across the Rockies, a convoy of blacked-out vehicles navigated the treacherous mountain roads. To the casual observer, they looked like snowplows and utility trucks. But inside were dozens of heavily armed federal agents. At exactly 3:30 a.m., the assault began. Alpha Team moved first. They cut the lodge's fiber optic cables, completely severing the property's connection to the outside world. They jammed all local cell towers and drone frequencies. Bravo Team fast-roped silently from helicopters onto the roof of the lodge. They carried suppressed rifles and thermal optics. They breached the skylights, tossing flashbangs into the main living quarters. The blinding light and deafening thunder shattered the silence of the luxury suites. "Federal agents! Do not move! Keep your hands where I can see them." The VIP guests, 14 high-end brokers who had flown in from around the world to conduct illicit business, were caught completely off guard. Many of them were found in their silk pajamas, surrounded by evidence of their crimes. They were forced to the floor and handcuffed immediately. Within 8 minutes, the main lodge was completely secured. But the real challenge was still ahead: the underground vault. Charlie Team, equipped with heavy hydraulic breaching tools, made their way to the hidden entrance behind a false wall in the wine cellar. The first titanium door was 3 inches thick. A standard battering ram was useless. They had to use a thermal cutting torch, carefully slicing through the hardened steel while the ventilation system filled the room with smoke. It took agonizing minutes. Finally, the door fell with a heavy thud. They descended into the freezing, 4-level bunker. Level by level, they cleared the vault. They found the laundering hub on level 2. Rows of counting machines, wire transfer terminals, and stacks of physical cash. "Step away from the desk and raise your hands slowly!" an agent yelled, his weapon leveled at a terrified financier. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. Julian Vance wasn't in the bunker. In fact, he wasn't even in the main lodge. The tactical commander's radio crackled. "Main target is not on the premises." While the bunker was being breached, the human element of the operation unfolded in the freezing Aspen dawn. The lodge staff, completely unaware of the illicit activities happening beneath their feet, were terrified. They were housekeepers, chefs, and maintenance workers who had simply been doing their jobs. When heavily armed FBI agents in full tactical gear stormed the building, the staff was understandably hysterical. Several of the younger employees were crying, terrified that they were going to be arrested or worse. This is where the human side of federal law enforcement shows up. Female agents from the FBI's crisis response team immediately removed their heavy helmets and ballistic goggles. They sat on the freezing marble floors with the terrified staff. They spoke to them calmly, explaining that they were not in trouble, that they were safe. Agents brought out thermal blankets, wrapping them around shivering employees who had been pulled from their beds. The agents carefully escorted the staff out of the building, shielding them from the tactical operation. They set up a triage center in the snowy garden, providing hot coffee and medical screenings. The contrast was stark. Inside the lodge, heavily armed agents were securing millions of dollars in illicit gold and weapons. Outside, agents were gently comforting a crying 20-year-old dishwasher, handing him a warm jacket and assuring him that the nightmare was over. Meanwhile, back inside the lodge, agents began the painstaking process of documenting the evidence. The marble foyers and luxury dining rooms, once filled with the laughter of billionaires, were now a federal crime scene. On the mahogany desks, agents found abandoned laptops still logged into offshore banking portals. They found stacks of fake invoices, ledgers detailing the movement of sanctioned art, and binders filled with the coded names of international criminals. But the mastermind was still missing. Julian Vance had vanished. The FBI knew he couldn't have gone far. The winter storm had grounded all flights, and the roads were treacherous. The U.S. Marshals Service, working alongside the FBI, traced a faint digital signal. Vance had a panic room, but it wasn't in the lodge. It was in his private mansion, located 9 miles down the mountain. A secondary strike team, traveling in a Bearcat G3 armored vehicle, immediately mobilized. They carved through the snow, their headlights cutting through the dark morning. Vance's private mansion was another fortress, but the security system was tied to the same network as the lodge. When the FBI cut the fiber optic cables, Vance's cameras went dark. He knew they were coming. The Bearcat smashed through the heavy iron gates of the mansion. The tactical team deployed a hydraulic battering ram against the reinforced front door. It took 3 devastating hits before the door finally gave way. The agents poured into the mansion, clearing rooms with precision. They found Vance in his bedroom, frantically trying to wipe a secure satellite phone. He was still wearing his silk pajamas, his face a mask of pure terror. He looked at the agents, trying to summon his usual charm. "You have no jurisdiction here," Vance stammered, his voice shaking. "I am a philanthropist. I donate millions to charity. This is a grotesque violation of my rights." The lead agent stepped forward, his boots crunching on the shattered glass of the front door. He stared at Vance, his expression completely flat. "You're not a philanthropist," the agent said coldly. "You're a money launderer in a tailored suit. And the Attorney General signed your warrant tonight." The agent grabbed Vance's wrists, slapping heavy steel handcuffs around them. The click of the metal echoed in the quiet room. Julian Vance, the billionaire mogul, was under arrest. By dawn, the full scope of Operation Winter Vault became clear. The raid was an unmitigated success. The FBI and their partner agencies had arrested 14 VIP brokers. They had frozen over $420 million in illicit assets. In the underground bunker, they had seized 340 individual illicit items. The inventory was staggering. They found crates of unregistered automatic weapons. They found burlap sacks filled with sanctioned gold bullion. They recovered 3 priceless paintings that had been stolen from a museum in Europe a decade earlier. And perhaps most importantly, they found the encrypted ledger. The press conference held later that afternoon sent shockwaves through the financial world. The United States Attorney stood before a bank of cameras, detailing the sheer scale of the operation. The numbers told the story of a massive, organized criminal empire that had been hiding in plain sight. The trial of Julian Vance and his co-conspirators was a media circus. Vance's high-priced legal defense team, costing millions of dollars, tried every trick in the book. They argued that Vance was simply a legitimate businessman who had been duped by his employees. They claimed the gold was a legitimate investment. They tried to suppress the evidence found in the bunker, arguing the thermal imaging violated his Fourth Amendment rights. But the prosecution's case was a mountain of concrete, undeniable evidence. They presented the wiretap recordings. They presented the procurement logs showing the missing 4,000 pounds of Wagyu beef. They presented the fake invoices. And they presented the testimony of Sarah, the junior accountant, whose simple, brilliant observation had unraveled the entire empire. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours. Julian Vance was found guilty on multiple federal charges, including violations of 18 U.S.C. 1956 for money laundering, wire fraud, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise under the RICO statute. The federal judge, visibly disgusted by the sheer scale of Vance's greed, showed no mercy. Vance was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. He was remanded immediately to a supermax facility, where he would spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. His co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 10 to 25 years. Looking back, the real question isn't why Julian Vance built this empire. It's how many other untouchable billionaires are operating similar schemes right now, shielded by their wealth and their status. Here's the take that'll probably get us flack. The sentence Julian Vance received, while substantial, still doesn't reflect the true damage he caused to global financial systems. 45 years is a massive sentence for a white-collar crime, but when you facilitate the movement of weapons and gold for cartels and sanctioned regimes, you are directly endangering national security. Honestly, we think Vance deserved life without parole in a maximum security dungeon, not a comfortable federal cell. What do you think? Did the federal government go far enough? Or are white-collar criminals still getting off easy compared to street-level offenders? The legal battle was over. Julian Vance's empire was dust. But the aftermath of Operation Wintervault was just beginning. Under federal asset forfeiture laws, the Aspen Ski Lodge, along with Vance's private mansion and his fleet of luxury vehicles, was seized by the United States government. The properties were eventually auctioned off. The hundreds of millions of dollars generated from the sale of these assets, along with the seized illicit cash, were placed into a federal trust fund. This fund wasn't used to line government coffers. It was repurposed to provide restitution. It established a lifetime trust for the victims of the cartels and criminal organizations that Vance had been doing business with. It funded medical care, educational scholarships, and relocation programs for families whose lives had been destroyed by the very cartels Vance was helping to finance. The physical underground bunker, the 4-level subterranean vault that had cost $40 million to build, was treated as an environmental hazard. Federal agents filled the entire structure with industrial concrete. They poured thousands of tons of gravel and cement into the tunnels, sealing the vault forever. The site was eventually repurposed, turned into a public wilderness conservation center. But the most chilling discovery came weeks after the trial ended. When the FBI's cyber unit finally cracked the encryption on Vance's secure servers, they uncovered the master client ledger. It wasn't just a list of brokers. It was a comprehensive directory of the global elite who had utilized the lodge's services. The list included Wall Street CEOs. It included prominent Hollywood producers. It included high-ranking foreign politicians and sanctioned oligarchs from around the globe. The encrypted logs detailed billions of dollars in transactions, the movement of stolen art, and the exact dates these VIP clients had visited the lodge. The implications were explosive. The Department of Justice immediately handed the decrypted files over to Interpol. Red notices were issued. A global manhunt was activated. The fall of Julian Vance was not the end of Operation Wintervault. It was merely the opening salvo in a worldwide purge. Today, no one on that list will sleep soundly. So, back to our trivia. Which federal statute specifically criminalizes the movement of illicit funds? The answer is B, 18 U.S.C. 1956. This statute makes it a federal felony to knowingly engage in a financial transaction with the proceeds of unlawful activity, carrying up to 20 years in prison per offense. It is the ultimate weapon against money launderers. No armored fortress is deep enough underground, nor any bank account unlimited enough to protect those who exploit the financial system from the relentless weight of American justice. If you want to keep watching us pull the threads that the rich and powerful would rather you not see, subscribe to Hoover Files and tell us in the comments which case you'd want us to break open next. Stay alert. We'll see you on the front lines of our next operation.